All right, well, the shop is a mess, and I thought I would show it to you in that form, not to give the impression that I always have all of my ducks in a row and everything's perfectly organized. And I thought I would do a video about how to get into small engine repair, why you might want to, and what you might need. So, first, let me tell you a quick story so that you understand how I got into small engine repair. I've been a mechanic ever since I was 17 years old, and always like to keep my hands dirty and work on stuff. And I live in a normal suburban type of neighborhood with lots of neighbors nearby. And since they see me working on my own car and they see the tools in the shop, they have gotten the impression that I'm handy with things like that. So several years ago, a really bad tornado came through town and lots of people were without power. And someone in the neighborhood asked me if I would fix a generator that they had because they wanted to loan it to a friend who was without electricity. And so I fixed it for free. And on our Facebook neighborhood page, I basically posted that if anyone had a generator that they were willing to share with the people without electricity, I would get it running for them free of charge. And over the next few days, I ended up fixing something like 20 generators. And it was fairly easy work, felt very rewarding to help those in need. And also, it saved people a lot of money and all that kind of stuff. So then someone actually from our church asked me if I could fix a chainsaw. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? So he brought me a couple chainsaws, and I kind of spread the word that I would do chainsaws as well. And I fixed about 75 chainsaws, just trying to help the people in need. Anyway, after that, lots of people had my phone number and kept calling me to fix other stuff like weed whackers, lawnmowers, stuff like that. And I turned off charity mode and basically turned it into a side gig where I could earn a little bit of money. Also, people aren't in need of a new lawnmower or a fixed lawnmower. That's a want. And so I didn't feel like doing it all for free. So that kind of tells you about how I got into it. So what I would suggest to you, if you want to get into it, what you could easily do is communicate somehow with your neighbors through a neighborhood Facebook page would be a good choice, or the Nextdoor website or something like that. And just say, I would like to learn and grow my competency in repairing small engines. And so if anyone has a small engine that is, let's say, lawnmower, pressure washer, generator, weed whacker, chainsaw, anything like that, that's not running, bring it on over and I'll fix it for free. You just pay for the parts. By doing that, you'll get a lot of customers and you'll be able to gain a lot of experience very quickly. And that's what happened to me. And of course, people will also have low expectations if you can't fix it or if it takes you a long time because you're doing it for free. And after you fix about 20, 40, 80 machines, you'll be quite good. So that's how to get into it from my suggestion. The reason why to get into it is because it is not a very competitive arena. There are lots of shops in town that fix broken cars. There are basically none that fix small engines because in order to have a building and electricity and a insurance and all of the tooling, you'd have to charge so much to each customer that they would just walk away because it's not worth putting $200 into a weed eater that costs $250. So it's a good thing to do outside, or not outside, but just in your home, out of your garage is what I meant to say. And you are legitimately filling a need, a gap in the industry. It can earn you some money. I earned something like $5,000 last year doing this. You meet lots of people. You develop interesting relationships. You meet people who in the future might be able to trade with you or help you, electricians, plumbers, all these kinds of things. And you're also keeping stuff out of the landfill. And you also get to meet a lot of your neighbors, which is really great for building a community. So for those wondering, here's how I charge. I charge $40 an hour with a 1 hour minimum. And I can fix about 90% of the stuff that comes my way within the hour. And that's because I've gotten good and fast over the last couple of years, but it's also because a lot of the stuff is repetitive. A lot of the stuff is related to carburetors, which I'll go into in a minute. I've developed a reputation in my particular neighborhood that people trust me, and it's not like we sign contracts or anything like that. And basically, sometimes I fix a machine in 10 minutes and I benefit from getting paid an hour's worth of labor. And sometimes, like in the very beginning, it took me 4, 5, 6 hours to diagnose something that now would only take me 10 minutes. So you can charge customers by the hour, but that basically means the worse you are at your job, the more they pay you. Or you can do what we would call like a flat rate. So that's what I do. I also keep track of it all in an Excel document. So I basically just have the date, whether it was a repair or a sale, because sometimes I sell machines that I'm given or something, who the customer was, what was the brand, what kind of machine, what was the model. I used to do this where I would check the compression on all the machines to kind of build up a database in my own mind of what's a good compression reading. I don't do it anymore, obviously, but I used to, and it's a good thing to do when you're starting. What was the customer's complaint? What did you do? What did the parts cost? How much did you charge labor? And then you can calculate your profit for the year. I think this is a really good idea, especially when you're learning, because it'll be really helpful to reference like, okay, what am I seeing on the most of these machines, and what's a good compression reading, and what did I do on that one machine that had that one symptom? It's also for tax reasons appropriate that you keep track, and I do list this on my taxes. So that's maybe the why and the how, and now I'll just kind of give you an example of what I would suggest you need to get started. So whenever you diagnose a machine, I would say 90% of the time the complaint is that it like doesn't start or starts really bad. And engines essentially need 3 things. That's air, fuel, and spark. So very rarely do you have an issue with air, where either the air filter's plugged up or the engine can't breathe or there's no compression. It happens occasionally, but it's pretty rare. And very rarely is there an issue with the spark plug or the ignition coil. I would say when it comes to a no start complaint, 85% of the time it's with fuel in the carburetor or the fuel tank. Probably 5% of the time it's low compression because there's a mechanical problem and it's not worth fixing those typically. And then maybe 10%, I forget what percentage I'm at, but 10% is ignition related. So yeah, what I would recommend doing is getting yourself a little can of carb cleaner. And when you get a machine, pull it over, see if you can get it to cough or even try and start. If you can, then you don't have an issue with compression. When you have low or no compression, the engine doesn't want to start at all. So if you can get it to cough or wheeze or choke, that kind of stuff, that's the way we would describe it when it kind of fires but doesn't fire very well. You can assume safely until you get more and more experienced. But for the vast majority of cases, you can assume that the compression is adequate, which means you don't really need a compression gauge in the beginning. Now, there's nothing wrong with buying a compression gauge in the beginning and taking compression measurements. That's good, and you'll learn a lot. But if you're intimidated or if you don't have a lot of money to put into this, then I would say leave the compression gauge and the fittings alone in the very beginning. The second thing is checking spark. And you can rudimentarily check spark very easily by taking out the spark plug, grounding it like so, or with a piece of metal, like a screwdriver or something, leaving this in the ignition coil boot, spinning this over not by hand like this, but with the pull cord. And if you see a little spark there, then in 99% of cases, the spark is fine. There are circumstances where the coil is weak and it works in atmospheric pressure, but not under compression. But that's pretty rare, and you probably won't find that as a beginner. So that leaves what is around 85% of the problem, which is issues in the carburetor. And you can especially expect issues in the carburetor if you're working on a seasonal item like a snowblower or a pressure washer or a generator, something that doesn't get used very often. And that's because fuel, like fruits and vegetables, goes bad. We don't think of that very often because the gas stations don't warn you about that, and you never have to think about it with your car because you use up the fuel in your car within a week. But inside of a small engine, the fuel will go bad. And it can lead to corrosion like you have here, especially if water gets inside if the machine was left outside. It can also lead to like this gummy varnish that kind of looks like tar, something like that. And so cleaning a carburetor is the solution in something like 85% of the cases when the customer says that the thing won't start, especially if it ran fine last fall, but this spring I can't start the mower, or especially if it ran fine last winter, but this winter it won't start for a snowblower, or It ran fine when I pressure washed or used the generator, but I haven't used it in a few years. You can almost bet your paycheck there's an issue in the carburetor. And carburetors, by and large, are going to be two different types. You're going to have a 4-stroke carburetor. This is what you're going to find on a lawnmower, a pressure washer, a generator, a snowblower. Some snowblowers, not all snowblowers. Being down here in Tennessee, I don't do that many snowblowers anymore, but I've done a few in Michigan. And 2-stroke carburetors is what you're going to find on chainsaws, weed eaters, leaf blowers, sometimes like those little tillers, basically any handheld item. These are often called cube carburetors because this main section is more or less like a cube. So you're going to need to get familiar with these two, and you will, especially if you have customers who give you machines that they don't care about anymore. You can disassemble them. There are some really good publications available on the internet for how these things work. I will give you some hints on where to find those in the description, or if you email me, I'm happy to send you the PDFs. And this is where the majority of your problems are going to be found. So getting these things off the machine is fairly easy. Sometimes you'll need a 10 millimeter for the bolt. Sometimes you'll need an 8. Sometimes you'll need a Torx. So some basic wrenches and sockets are handy. What are the most handy is these two. That's an 8 and a 10. They fit right in a drill or a impact, so it makes very fast work, but you don't have to have these. You can find those on Amazon. Then you're going to need a couple basic screwdrivers. Don't have to be these nice ones. They can be any old ones. And what you're going to find most of the time on these 4-strokes is that the main jet down inside of this tube is plugged up. And so you're probably going to want to find a cheap screwdriver so that you can grind the edges, because a lot of screwdrivers won't fit into that hole properly because they have these flanges. So you have to probably grind or sand the edges off of one like I did. And you pull him out, and inside of there is a teeny tiny little hole known as an orifice, also known as a jet, and you got to clean that out. And one of the best ways to clean that out is to find or buy these little automotive or aviation style keychains. Sometimes you can get these for free. And what you do is you take one of those and you cut it, and then you unravel one of these little stainless steel things. And these fit into every single hole you're ever going to find on one of these machines. Even the itty bitty tiny jets that you find in these things, this will fit through. So you don't need to buy one of these, although these can be handy. Although even these, the smallest size torch tip cleaner, still won't go as small as this. So just get this. And then, you know, an assortment of brushes is a helpful idea, but, you know, see what you actually need. Who doesn't have one of these lying around, I suppose, in most cases. But, yeah, if you don't have some of these, then something like that. These little guys are handy for getting into certain corners. And then, yeah, and then you're probably going to need a couple Torx. I like painting mine so that I can immediately know which color is which. So basically, these are the colors I chose. T20, 25, 27, orange for steel and Husqvarna, and green for 30. You probably don't need a 30 for a long time. A 20 will remove a 25. There's enough slop in the fastener that you can use a 20 on a 25 Torx, although it's a little sloppy, and a 25 works in a 27. So theoretically, you could get by with, you know, just these two, or just these two, or something like that. But obviously you want to be careful you don't strip it out. But yeah, get a T20, 25, and 27. Those are really the three you're going to use most often. Occasionally you need a T10, occasionally you need a T30, but most of the time not. You can get these T-handle ones if you want. You can get these kind. You can get the kind that fit in sockets. There's a bunch of types, but if you're just starting out, spend the smallest amount of money that you can to get going and find out if this is even a good fit for you. You'll hear a lot of people say buy the highest quality tools that you can find. I disagree with that. Don't get me wrong, I own Snap-on, I own Bosch, I own very high-end tools, but it is foolish to buy a $300 angle grinder that you use once every 2 years when you could buy a $30 angle grinder. If you know you're going to use something like crazy, buy quality. If you're starting out and you're not sure, buy cheap. And then when it breaks, if it breaks, you will really appreciate the high quality tools that you buy instead. So yeah, so you're gonna need some Torxes, you're gonna need something to clean out jets, you're gonna need some carb spray so that you can find out if the engine will start. Basically, if you have a non-starting engine and you spray a little bit of this past the air filter into the engine and all of a sudden it starts, you know you got a fuel problem. The air's fine, the spark's fine, the compression's fine. This is a very useful tool. You can also use this for cleaning out the carburetors. Yeah, and then on a two-stroke style carburetor, what you'll find 80% of the time is that you remove these 4 screws. Underneath there will be what's called a metering diaphragm. Take note as to how this comes out because you need to put it back the same way. This disc always faces the inside of the carburetor. And then these become really stiff and rigid and they crickle and crack and don't vibrate anymore properly. And then on the other side, on this side, you have what's called a fuel pump diaphragm. Those can go brittle, although they don't do it quite as often, so you don't have to worry about that quite as much. That's the piece that goes here. And yeah, so then what I would also recommend grabbing, not because tuning a carburetor will fix most of your machines, only because you need to remove these 2 adjustment screws in order to clean through the passageways. You're gonna need some carburetor adjustment tools. Get those on Amazon for something like 10 bucks. And then if you're doing this and you're liking this and you're making some money and you want to up your efficiency game, then get yourself a little box and start collecting the pieces that you need quite often. So the most commonly used thing in this box is these 4 metering diaphragm styles. I bought them on Amazon. You can buy them elsewhere if you want. But if you Google or if you go on Amazon, you go for 2-cycle metering diaphragms, carburetor metering diaphragms. There's basically 4 types. And this is gonna cover, I think it was like 10 bucks for 20 of them or something, or they're like 50 cents or 25 cents a piece. You get a pack of 10 or 15, 20, something like that. There's basically 4 styles. Arm yourself with all 4 styles, and that means that 90% of the time, you can turn around and fix the machine within the same day rather than ordering parts. Also, by buying a pack, these are much less expensive than buying a carburetor rebuild kit. The next thing, you know, you're gonna go through some primer bulbs. You're gonna need some fuel filters occasionally. That's what a plugged one looks like. I was looking for that the other day to show you guys. And then these are just miscellaneous pieces that I've gotten when I have bought kits or when a machine has been scrapped and can't be repaired. I'll take some of these pieces off of there that are handy, and I keep an assortment of plugs, really just for testing purposes. If I think it needs a plug, I'll just grab a plug that fits. And if the symptom changes, then it's a confirmation that it might need a plug. Then I'll get the correct plug. But yeah, that's basically what you need to get started. Again, you don't have to do this in the beginning. In the very beginning, you're gonna need something to clean out the jets, something to diagnose and clean the carburetors, a couple Torx, couple normal screwdrivers, one which you're willing to grind up to get in there. And that's about it. Later, you can get yourself an assortment of parts. You can get yourself a compression gauge. You can get yourself some blowtorch tip cleaner like this. You need some carburetor adjustment tools. Of course, these guns speed up the process and help things go faster. Of course, a large selection of sockets is nice, and a large selection of different ways to get Torx is nice, but you don't need those things. The only other thing you might need is a pair of needle nose pliers. I would just get any old needle nose pliers, take some duct tape, wrap the ends up a little bit so that they're not so serrated and sharp. If you really want to spoil yourself, these from Knipex are really nice. They're about 30 bucks, but they're really handy. What is this, 31, 160? I really like these, but you absolutely don't need something like this. It's just a luxury. So this video is not meant to be an exhaustive analysis of what's needed to fix small engines. Obviously, you'll need other things at some point, but if you're just trying to get into it, I hope that helps you with the how and the why and what to expect and what you need to get started. And yeah, hope that was helpful for you. If it wasn't, I would go check out Steve's Small Engine Saloon. He also does a pretty good job with this kind of stuff. I've learned quite a bit from him. He's also pretty funny, and you'll probably like his videos more than mine. So take care, guys.